Most people think conditional formatting is just about making spreadsheets look pretty. It isn't. Used properly, it can instantly highlight problems, save hours of manual checking, and make important information jump off the screen automatically. Let me show you 4 conditional formatting tricks I use all the time.
So my first tip is all about identifying duplicates. Now, most people that use Excel already realize that you can remove duplicates automatically by going up to the Data tab of the ribbon and using this tool here, Remove Duplicates. But that's not always what you want. Now, I have a list here of about 300 records, and I don't know whether any of these are duplicated or not. And to go through these and try and find duplicates by eye would give me a terrible headache. So what I'm going to do instead is use conditional formatting. So I'm going to click at the top of the column and I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut Shift Control and the down arrow. That takes me down to the bottom of the column and selects all the cells in it. Then I'm going to go up to the Home tab of the ribbon and then conditional formatting, highlight rules, and guess what? We've got duplicate values. So all I need to do is highlight that, say OK, and then when I click away and scroll back up the column, you can see all the records that are duplicated, all the numbers here. I mean, you'd be very hard pushed to spot these with the naked eye. But there they all are. And of course, because I'm using a little table here, filter tabs are automatically turned on. So if I want to, I can filter by color. And there we are. All my duplicated records are now shown in a list. How easy is that? So this is great for things like customer lists, employee IDs, invoice numbers, that's the sort of example that we've just looked at, product codes. And if you change the formatting from the default red to something a little bit more subtle, it's much better if it's going into a report, for example. And you can do that by going up to the conditional formatting button and then going down to manage rules. And this is the one that we want to edit, the only one we've got. So if I click edit rule, I can then change the formatting to something a little bit more pleasing. Let's make it a pale green instead, so that although they will still stand out, they don't look quite so garish. So that's my first tip. Let's move on to the second one here on the overdue sheet. What I've got here is a list of tasks in column A and a list of dates. Now what I want conditional formatting to do here is to highlight dates that are overdue. Now you could obviously use this for things like invoices, but the way I'm going to do this is with a formula. I could choose a date occurring. So if we go to conditional formatting, highlight cells rules, you see that there's an option here for a date occurring. But the problem with that is it only gives you finite times like yesterday, last week, and so forth. If you want more control, then you need to use a formula. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll say I want a new rule, and then when the dialog box opens, I'm going to use a formula to determine which cells format. Now what I want to do here is I'm going to put 2 rules in. I want one to say if it's earlier than today, then it's obviously overdue, and I want the second one to make sure that the cell isn't blank. Okay, so I'm going to use 2 rules here. So I'll start off by putting in my equal sign, and then I want them both to be valid, so I'm going to put an AND function in. All right, so that's the first thing. I'll use the first cell here in column B, so I'll say B2. So if B2 is less than or earlier than today, and I'm going to use a function for that. So TODAY, and then I need to put in the opening and closing parenthesis, add a comma, and then I want to make sure the cell's not blank. So I'll also say B2 is not equal to, so I'll put an less than and greater than sign in, and then a pair of empty parentheses to indicate a blank. And I want this to be formatted as red, but I'm not going to use a bright red because it's too heavy. So I'll use a pale red and say OK to that. OK again. And there you go. So you can see immediately that today is the 5th of August. So yesterday, the 4th of August, was clearly overdue. So the fire alarm test is actually overdue. So now that I've done that, this is automatically going to update itself. So tomorrow, The site will update itself without my intervention. I won't need to edit it, don't need to refresh it, don't need to copy formulas. It just works. And if I show you that by changing one of these dates, let me just change this one. I'll change it from the 11th, which is next week. I'll change it to the day before yesterday, which was the 3rd. And so now you can see that that automatically updates itself. So that's tip number 2. Let's move on to tip number 3. And tip number 3 is all about top and bottom rules. So here I've got a list of salespeople's names and I've got a list of their net sales in the column next door. So what I want to do with this is highlight the top and the bottom performers in this list. There's lots of different ways that you can do this, but I'm going to use conditional formatting to do it. But before I do that, you can see that we've got a table style applied to the table here. I'm just going to change that from the table design ribbon and remove any colors, because otherwise it will interfere with the conditional formatting. Okay, I'm going to apply conditional formatting to the whole of this list. So let me just go up to the conditional formatting button. And I want to highlight sales rules, and I'm going to choose top and bottom rules. So I'm going to say top 10 items, and instead of 10, I'm going to change that to 3. And because of these are my top items, I'm going to change the fill color to green and say OK. So there we go. We've now got our top performers, and then I'm going to do the same again. So just go back up to conditional formatting, and I'm going to add a second rule, top and bottom rules, and this time I'm going to choose bottom 10 items, and again, instead of 10, I'm going to change that to 3, and I'll leave the fill color as it is. When I click away from there, you can see quite clearly now who our top performers are and who our worst performers are. And of course, it's very easy because we're using a table. If I click to sort largest to smallest, and that way you've got the top 3 performers at the top and the bottom 3 at the bottom. Okay, next one I'm going to move on to is the checkboxes sheet. And here we've got our old friends, the checkboxes. Now, I've got a list of tasks in column B, and I've got a due by date in column D. Now, again, if I click in a box, you'll see that if you have a look at the formula bar, every time a box is checked, a ticked checkbox has a value as true. And again, if I use the space bar to untick it, you can see that it has a value as false. So again, what we can do with this is use conditional formatting. And again, for this one, I'm going to use a formula. I'll go up to conditional formatting. Once again, I want a new rule. And from here, I'll use a formula. Now, in this case, I want the checkbox. So if A2 is true, so I'll put in my equals sign, and then I'll put a $sign because we want to lock the reference to the column. So $A2, but we don't want to lock the reference to the row, equals true. And then the format I want for this is I'm going to click the format button, and for the font, I want this to have a strike through, okay, so that it looks as if it's been done. So I'm going to strike through, and I'm going to put a fill color in there of pale gray, right, so that it fades into the background. And I'll say OK, OK again, and this time when I tick the box, select the cell and tick the box. Wow, how about that? So every time one of these tasks is completed, it's now automatically stricken through and a grey format applied. So I hope you agree this is really useful. There's no VBA, no macros, and no automation. It's just conditional formatting responding to the true and false values generated by modern Microsoft 365 checkboxes. So conditional formatting isn't about colors, it's about making Excel do the watching for you. Whether you're spotting duplicate data, keeping track of deadlines, identifying your best performers, or automatically crossing off completed tasks, these simple rules can save you hours every week. So which one of these 4 tricks will you start using first? Let me know in the comments. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for news of my latest videos. There's a discount coupon link to my Udemy course in the description. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.